John Greenfield. I'm so glad you are here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I was reading your Streetblog Chicago, and there were a lot of pedestrian deaths every year. It was a lot last year, and a lot of them was in like a few miles from my house. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, we just did our final count of pedestrian fatalities on Chicago's surface streets, so that doesn't count the expressways. But looking over a few different sources, including local news reports, which I check every weekday morning for Streetsblog Chicago's today's headline stack. Also the Chicago Police Department records, and the Chicago Department of Transportation puts together reports every month of the number of crashes. Streets Block Chicago co-founder Stephen Vance also does a he does a crash guide as well. So sometimes we miss things through the other sources that he finds. Anyway, so the final number for this year, 2025, last year rather, is 36. That's 36 pedestrian deaths, and there were also two bicycle fatalities last year. So that's slightly lower than the number of pedestrian fatalities, in 2024, which was 38. I think there were 4 bike fatalities last year, so, the numbers fell somewhat last year, which is good, but, we're still a long way to go before we meet the, city of Chicago's Vision Zero goals to completely eliminate serious and fatal crashes.
And what are some of the causes for pedestrians being killed on the roads?
Alright, one thing we found is about half of the pedestrian crashes last year were hit and run crashes. Um, and the Chicago Department of Transportation monthly crash reports, they often tell you what factors were involved, like whether the crash was a hit and run, whether there was speeding, whether there was a large vehicle involved, things like that. And so those are all things that come into play. We really want people to go at safer speeds. Last year in city council, there was a vote over whether to lower Chicago's default speed limit from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour, which is what they did in New York and a few other peer cities of Chicago. And they found that that really helped lower the number of pedestrian fatalities. Like in New York, after they did that, they found they had the lowest pedestrian fatality rate in 100 years. So it really worked well there. Unfortunately, that ordinance didn't pass in city council. A few more alders voted against it than for it. So, hopefully they'll bring back that initiative soon.
John,
And
do you think
take
that
another vote on it.
are bigger vehicles part of the problem?
Yeah, totally. There's a few different factors, but yeah, a big problem is large vehicles like SUVs with poor sight lines. Sometimes the drivers just, literally cannot see pedestrians underneath them. Um, and these vehicles are more likely to kill vulnerable road users like pedestrians and bike riders and e-scooter riders, because they've got the high front ends. So instead of going over the hood, people tend to go under the vehicle and get crushed. So, in a lot of other wealthy countries around the world, they've banned these kind of vehicles, but so far, the United States, there hasn't been much action to do anything like that. Making not banning SUVs, but banning like huge monster SUVs that just cannot see children below them, things like that.
What can pedestrians? 'Cause I'm scared to cross the street. I don't care where I'm at. I'm scared to cross the street. It's precarious. So what can pedestrians do to make it safer for them, us?
Um, you know, I think there's a lot of things let's just assume there's going to be bad behavior by road users in general, whether people are walking, biking, um, you know, crossing the street to catch the bus, driving. We need to just assume stuff like that is going to happen. But what we need to do is make it less likely that crashes are going to result in serious injuries and fatalities. We also need to keep in mind that, like, your responsibility to behave safely is a lot larger if you're in a 6,000 pound um, electric Hummer vehicle than if you're on I think they're about 75-pound electric divvy bike. So we had a case downtown, I think it was last winter, where there was a young man who, was on an e-divvy bike and was struck by an SUV, huge electric Hummer vehicle SUV at Randolph in Michigan. And, whether the bike rider was doing everything he should have been doing safety-wise is up for debate, but, police also found that the driver. I should say, actually, there was evidence that the bike rider did not have a green light, but, the police also cited the driver for failure to use due care to prevent a crash, and, I've also seen reports that the driver was going at a high rate of speed when he went into the green. So, we should expect that people are gonna make mistakes, make bad decisions, but, that shouldn't be a death sentence when people do that. So, like, I'd like to see 6,000-pound Hummers off the street, for example.
But the
I
on
don't think we
onus
need big.
the onus is on the driver, but when I drive, I wanna tell people sometimes I could be wrong, but sometimes I think they can see the cars, but sometimes the cars, for whatever reason, we're distracted driving, we can't see them. And they assume people walk around, "You don't you see me coming?" And they like, "Hey, you supposed to slow down. You supposed to see me." And sometimes when you drive, you don't see people. Either it's at night, they're not wearing reflective clothing. It's I know the onus is on the driver, but pedestrians should play it a little bit safer, right? And just assuming crazy people out here driving, which they are.
I don't think we should expect pedestrians to wear reflective clothing. I expect when you leave your house and go to the corner store for a newspaper or something, like, you don't wanna put on a reflective safety vest, do you? Like, you wouldn't wanna be expected to do that. So what we need to do is create, street designs and policies that make it safe even if somebody makes a mistake. So let me go over some more of those, just other things we can do. So speed is a huge factor in whether a crash is fatal. National studies have shown that if a driver is going 20 miles an hour and hits a vulnerable road user like a pedestrian or a person on a bike, the person almost always survives. At 30 miles an hour, which is our default speed limit in Chicago, it's 50-50. And if the driver is going 40 miles an hour, the pedestrian or bike rider is almost certainly going to die. And, the speed also is a factor in vehicle crashes. Um, so lowering the speed limit would help a lot. Another thing that encourages speeding in Chicago is our road layouts. Like, we have a lot of major streets, arterial streets that essentially have 5 lanes for driving, not to mention the 2 for parking. But you take a street like Ashland Avenue, is generally has 2 travel lanes in each direction and a turn lane, so 5 lanes. And there were 4 pedestrian fatalities on Ashland this year. Um, we've also seen a lot of pedestrian fatalities and motorist fatalities too, on streets like Pulaski. I think there were 3 on Cicero in Chicago this year. So, in addition to just like declaring that the speed limit is lower, that we're changing from 30 to 25, by putting up signs, which actually would be helpful because some drivers like to follow the letter of the law or not go much more than 5 miles over the speed limit. We can also do stuff that, requires people to go the speed limit. Now, a very controversial thing is automated enforcement, speed cameras and red light cameras. Um, I'll grant you, like, a problem with those is that politicians like to use them as revenue sources. For example, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, he was pretty upfront that he wanted to add more speed cameras to help address the city's budget deficit. And I don't think that's a good way to do things. That uh, while speed cameras and red light cameras have been shown to be very effective in preventing serious and fatal crashes, we shouldn't be using the money to balance the budget, and we shouldn't, if that's the case, then we want as many people speeding and running reds as possible so we could, help the budget. But the goal of putting in automated enforcement should be to lower the amount of speeding and red light running. And, when they do come up with revenue, we should use that revenue for strategies that help reduce speeding and red light running. Use that as funding for safe streets projects. So the kind of things I'm talking about are safety infrastructure that helps people walking, biking, using transit, and driving. So, an example of what's going on with that and why it's controversial is what's called 4 to 3 road diet. Um, so Archer Avenue on the southwest side, it's a southwest northeast diagonal street that goes from the downtown area to Midway Airport. So there's a project going on right now in the Brighton Park neighborhood on the southwest side. Um, so it's between Western Avenue and 47th Street, a couple of miles, few miles. It's so a 4 to 3 conversion is when you take a 4-lane street, which is what safe streets advocates refer to as a strode. So that's like a mixed word that means a street fused with a road. So it's basically like putting a highway in the middle of a dense pedestrian area, like Brighton Park. So on Archer Avenue, because of that design, which encourages speeding, it also there aren't as many turn lanes as there should be. There aren't enough crosswalks, marked crosswalks. Um, there have been a fairly high of crash rate on that street, and in recent years there have been 5 pedestrian and bike fatalities at least, with 4 of them senior citizens. One of them took place in Brighton Park in 2024 at Pershing Road and Archer Avenue. So what they're trying to do with this project is they're doing the 4 to 3 conversions, so turning the 4-lane strode into a 3-lane street, one travel lane each direction, and then turn lanes. And the turn lanes will, those will help prevent crashes. Like there was a crash. One of the 5 crashes I mentioned was last year. A woman in her 80s named Maria Ochoa was in the Gage Park neighborhood near Midway Airport, and she was just minding her own business, walking down the street. I thought she might have been in a crosswalk, but there was someone trying to make a left turn. I'm not sure if there was a left turn lane there, but they were in a hurry to make their left turn, and they didn't yield to oncoming traffic, struck another vehicle. One of the vehicles flipped and struck Ms. Ochoa, so that was,
It was
through no fault of her own.
Archer and Laramie by the Wendy's and, yeah, Archer and Laramie.
Okay, you heard about this case?
I'm familiar with it. I mean, yeah, I heard about it. Keep going.
Alright.
Yeah,
So,
it's a tragedy, it's a tragedy. And
yeah,
that
and
was
I mean,
at
it's
5
it's a
PM, 5
preventable
PM.
tragedy. It's
Yeah.
not just like an act of God that happened. There's actually things we can do about stopping tragedies like that from happening, like putting in dedicated turn lanes, like, doing a 4 to 3 conversion so there's less room for speeding. For drag racing is also a problem on Archer. So some other things going on with that project, the Archer Traffic Safety Project, are they're doing sidewalk extensions, okay, curb bump outs, which means you widen the sidewalk, which makes it a shorter distance across the street. They're adding pedestrian islands. They're putting in more crosswalks and walk signals. They're putting in bus boarding islands, which are they're bulbs that go out in the street that allow bus drivers to pick up pedestrians without customers without having to pull to the curb and back. And it sounds like that, might delay people in the travel lane, but you don't have buses coming in and out of the travel lane, so it's not as much of a difference as you might think. And that speeds up bus trips. And then they're also adding protected bike and scooter lanes, um, which, among other things, Curie High School is near there, and there's another school near there, and there's problems with high school students riding bikes and e-scooters on the sidewalk, which endangers pedestrians. So that'll help keep people riding e-bikes and scooters off the sidewalks. But it's a controversial project because it's going to make driving fast a little less convenient. Um, I got more to say about that. Anything else you want to chime
Tell
in
you what,
about?
hey, when the show is over, I'm gonna
It
send
is, okay.
I mean, no, we good. I'm gonna send this to some of the older people here in Chicago. They might enjoy it, and hopefully they may do some legislation, slow down the speed. John Greenfield, thank you for being my guest.
Well, sure thing. Thanks for having me.